Welcome back to Gentle Growth with Ivy. As always, this is Ivy, and today we have a special guest. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, Ivy. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to chat with you. My name is
Absolutely.
Lucas Catton. I'm the founder and CEO of Innovia Behavioral Health, and we are an organization that provides ongoing support for people in life in between other forms of help, and whether that's through employee benefits or for individuals who are looking for support, we want to help fill those gaps.
Nice. And what kind of passion led you to this path?
Good question.
Thank you.
So I was pretty unsure of myself in my teens and 20s as far as what I wanted to do in life. And I didn't really know where I belonged, where I fit in, what was happening, and wound up getting in some trouble, as college students might,
Mm-hmm.
and wound up actually meeting people at a facility that were all sort of there, kind of lost, not sure where they were going, not sure where they fit in. And I realized that this is a place where I fit in, was a bunch of really passionate people who cared about others and just needed some direction and purpose in life. And that's really what
Mm-hmm.
I needed at the time. And that was 25, 27 years ago, something along that line, and really got into it ever since of like, how can I be a part of organizations that are helping people to feel better and do better in life?
That's awesome. Yeah. Because I feel like everybody, not everybody, but at least the majority of the people that I speak to, we all, including myself, had that area in life where you had passion and you wanted to do something good and or just something in general, but you feel just very stuck or unsure of what to do. But there are these people that end up showing up or that we end up finding or crossing paths with that can give us an insight from their experiences as well. Um, I know me as a coach, that's how I help a lot of people is from the things that I've experienced and being able to share the tools that I learned and just letting them take what they can and apply what they can.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think you bring about a great point too, in that, help for people can come in so many different forms.
Hmm.
And there's so many different ways that people can be supported as well. And sometimes that might be a clinical setting and sometimes it might not be. And after working in strictly clinical settings for a long time, that was why we wanted to actually create something that kind of was able to cross over different boundaries and be able to offer different types of help for people's different needs in life.
Hmm.
And I think that's a beautiful thing that the coaching world brings, because
Hmm.
not everybody needs therapy and not everybody needs a coach, but
Hmm.
sometimes they might need both.
Oh, absolutely. It can definitely go hand in hand. So I really like the individuality that seems to be more embraced nowadays. I feel like in the past, everything was kind of categorized a very specific way. Um, Even with like diagnosis and treatments, paperwork, everything was just, it was like certain categories with certain symptoms, certain treatments. Um, and I really like how now we are seeing that not everyone is the same and everyone is different and everybody is going to need a different approach along their healing journey and things that help them in life in general. Definitely not a one size fits all.
Right. Totally. I think a lot of people don't realize many of those classification systems are actually driven by the insurance industry, because
Mm,
they're requiring a diagnosis in order to get reimbursement. And so people get put into these different categories and have different labels sometimes that either don't necessarily belong there, or it might be a fluid or a transitory like time period in their life, and that might not fit with them, but yet sometimes they're being told that this is something they now have forever,
mm,
as a permanent diagnosis. And I think sometimes that can also be damaging. And this is just a personal opinion. It's not for a disclaimer, I'm not a clinician. I've just
Right.
worked in this space long enough and seen that enough, and consulted with lots of experts in the field as well who feel the same way.
Hmm.
And I think that the personalization, like you mentioned, is such a key thing, because something may be right for a person at that particular time, but what might help them continue to move forward or to continue to grow may be something totally different 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 5 years from now.
Hmm.
And that they may be a totally different person. And there's plenty of science and research behind changes in biology and neuroplasticity and all that really shows that you can't just pigeonhole someone, and that's the label that they're then stuck with for the rest of their lives.
Hmm. Oh, I absolutely agree. I personally was misdiagnosed in the past. I was speaking with a therapist, and within just a couple sessions, he diagnosed me as bipolar. And then I was worked hand in hand with my doctor, which then prescribed me bipolar medication.
Mhm.
And so, like, not only was I diagnosed, I had this label, and then, this professional giving me, ideas of how I can better myself or, cope with certain things based on that bipolar diagnosis, along with medication. Um, it was all like really confusing, and it did the opposite of help. Um, and it really does, it could really stem to that, like you said, everything's just kind of required for like insurance purposes.
Mhm.
Because I know that my insurance at that time was very strict, and there was a lot of paperwork that went in with every session. And so I kind of wonder, like, what kind of role that played in. But it's so true. And then the things that helped me then are most definitely not the things that are helping me now.
Right.
And it's really important to note that people change. And what worked for them 5 years ago, just like what worked for me 5 years ago, is not what's helping me now. And the things that are helping me now may not be the same thing that's going to help me 5 years from now. It's definitely important to keep things evolving.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I had a great conversation with someone yesterday that was talking about a similar thing. Like, after going through a really traumatic period in their life, they had been raised a certain way, and then would never have even considered certain other practices, let's say, and through a friend was introduced to various health and wellness journey type things, and something even as simple as doing yoga now, for example,
Hmm.
or some breath work or something like that can have a profound impact on someone. And they were like, yeah, it absolutely changed my life. Something so simple that I was so shut off to before, because I thought um, that one view or that one path was the correct one, and it may
Hmm.
have been at one point, but it was no longer serving them. So.
Wow, that really resonates with me. Personally, I was brought up very Christian, um, uh, very, Bible led and all that. And so, whenever my therapist a couple years ago recommended for me to try meditation and yoga, I decided to look into it, and I seen that there was a lot of ties to like Hinduism and Buddhism. And so I told my therapist, I was like, I cannot do that. That is 100% against my religion. Like,
Mhm.
please don't, recommend that or whatever. And she informed me, like, I'm a Christian too. And it's more about your intention, and like your attention is what's more important. And as long as you don't have the intention of going in that you're practicing the Hinduism or the Buddhism, or there's a lot that can tie into meditation and yoga. As long as you're not putting your intention in that area, then it's okay. You can have a Christian intention going in with that. um, and that just, it really opened my mind into things that I could try to put into work for myself.
Mhm.
Um, because that mindset definitely, it had me closed off, and I couldn't try those new things. And so whenever I was like, oh, it's the intention that I put behind it that truly matters. Once I tried those things and they worked, and I still was keeping to my Christian faith, um, it felt good, and it truly helped me along my healing journey.
Yeah, perfect example. Exactly. That's,
Hmm.
and with things like that too, like sitting and breathing and taking a moment and clearing your mind and having some focused attention and things like that without any dogmatic principles that then enter in, like you must believe this or that, etc.
Hmm.
Those, just if you strip it down to its bare minimum, then it's a universally applicable thing that people can then put whatever their intention is into it, like you said. So
Hmm.
that's a perfect example.
Thank you. Yeah, it definitely. Whenever you said that, I was like, wow, that sounds exactly like what I went through.
Yeah.
um. So, okay, I asked you about your passion. Sorry, I drew a complete blank. What are some of the things that you practice with your clients?
So we do something pretty different because everything that we do is actually group based. There's a lot
Mm.
of amazing. We do, there's so many amazing coaches and therapists and counselors and things like that are out there that people can do a lot of individual work with. And then there's lots of other groups that are out there as well, therapy groups, etc., support groups. What we do is we create a variety of educational, experiential, and therapeutic support groups that people can participate in based on what it is that's going on in their life at that time. So
Hmm.
rather than giving them a direction, we might ask, well, what is something that you're currently struggling with or currently is causing additional stress or that you would like to find some relief with or from? Or what are you interested in learning more about? And then we can help point them to different groups that might approach those topics with various facilitators or facilitators that are, right up their alley of their general belief system or that kind of thing. So even if it's more health and wellness related, we can, do things in that direction. If it's more traditional mental health and recovery related topics, anxiety, depressive mood, etc., we do things for that. Or maybe it's, workplace scenario where they're dealing with burnout and they're dealing with conflict, that sort of thing. We can address that as well. So it really depends on really a much more individually um, focused, like what's going on in their life at that time, and that's how we try and make that available rather than prescribing a certain path for them.
Hmm. But I like how, I mean, you pretty much labeled every aspect of life, where you can meet them at and help them improve. And I also like the group aspect of it as well. Um, because in my healing journey, feeling alone was one of the hardest things that I dealt with. I pretty much isolated myself. I didn't realize what I was doing.
Hmm.
Um, and it was very lonely. And so to put somebody in a group who is also struggling with the same things and who also has the same goals, or at least, similar,
Hmm.
it really takes that loneliness away. And it's like, wow, these people are like me and they're struggling with the same things that I'm struggling with. And it can give you that motivation if maybe, you're struggling still in a certain area in the group or something, to see somebody else be able to accomplish that. You're like, well, if they did it, they have the same struggles, I can do that too. So it's a really big motivator, and it's inspiring. Um, and there's just a lot to that that I really like.
Totally. Thank you. It's,
Yeah.
there's so many things about a group dynamic because you can come in and glean something from someone else based on the solutions they shared or the
Hmm.
situations, and be like, oh, I never thought of it that way.
Hmm.
And in a different scenario, but in a similar, a similar situation, but there's their unique thing. But there's also that loneliness that you're talking about. I mean, there's a reason why the Surgeon General issued the loneliness epidemic,
Mm.
or the epidemic of loneliness and isolation, because it is such a problem worldwide. Even though we're the most connected we've ever been, we're also the
Hmm.
most lonely and disconnected and isolated than we've ever
Hmm.
been as a culture. And by including a group dynamic, it allows for people to realize that their situation is not so unique, that there's
Hmm.
other people who understand what it's like to be going through something similar, that you're not alone, that you do belong, that you do have a way to connect and grow. And that is so important because a lot
Hmm.
of people just internalize what it is that they feel like, oh, well, nobody's ever going to understand what I'm going through. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just not true. There's lots of other people that might not have those exact same circumstances, but are going to be enough to where you know that they do understand.
Yeah. And feel relatable and understood.
Yeah.
Feeling understood is huge. Because I know a lot of times whenever you don't feel understood, you can almost feel crazy in a way.
Hmm.
Like, why am I feeling like this? Why is this affecting me the way that it is? And it's just a lot of whys. So if you can get somebody who is able to meet you on your level and say, I understand, you're not alone, it truly goes far. I know my therapist was huge in my healing journey.
Hmm.
But something really special that she brought to the table was she honestly coached me in a way, because she had very similar experiences to what I did. And like the therapist that I had before that misdiagnosed me, there was a time when we were talking about being diagnosed with like PTSD, and he asked me to describe the situation that could have led to that. And he had to stop me, and he was like, okay, I don't need to hear anymore, that's fine. But then he ended up telling me that what I went through wasn't traumatic enough to be diagnosed with PTSD. And so that was really hard on me. And whenever I had my therapist that was like, I went through something similar, you can share your experience, you can share every detail that you feel necessary. And she truly held that space for me and truly understood what I was going through. It was a really different feeling.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That reminds me of well, first of all, like in terms of trauma, right? Trauma isn't necessarily what happened. It's
Hmm.
our internal response to what happened. People can go through the
Yes,
exact same experience and have completely different outcomes or results or feelings about that experience.
absolutely.
And so for someone else to immediately judge, oh, that's not severe enough, and especially when you get into like there's little T's and big T's and things in
Hmm.
terms of trauma, that there's you can't automatically dismiss someone else's reaction to what it was that was occurring to them at that time, and how they felt about it, and their response to it. And also at the same time, I love the concept of uh, comparative suffering, in that some
Hmm.
people say, oh, well, your problems aren't as severe as my problems, so somehow I'm going to negate them or make them less than because
Hmm.
they perceive theirs to be a bigger problem or a bigger trauma or a worse situation. And that's totally not fair, because everything is
Hmm.
so unique to that person and their individual experiences and the knowledge and information and support that they had at that time and what they have going forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's another podcaster that I listen to. His name's Cameron Rosin. He's an amazing individual. Um, but he had somebody else on his podcast, and the person was saying how they have a hard time kind of empathizing with other people, because when they are making a big deal out of a situation that he personally doesn't feel is as big of a deal, he feels like they're just kind of, excuse my language, just bullshitting him, is what he said. And he mentioned that what really helped him be able to hold space for these people that he felt like was making a big deal out of something was that whenever he is there for someone, it's not his job to judge how upsetting or how traumatic a situation could be.
Mhm.
Because just because somebody maybe failed a math test, is the example that he used, just because they failed a math test and it was a really big deal to them, but to you that's no big deal, that doesn't mean that they are still experiencing something big to them. And so he was saying how, putting it on a scale of 0 to 10, just because failing a math test is a 10 to them and a 3 to me, doesn't make that any less of a 10 to them.
Right.
That's still a 10, and it's not up to us to judge their scale. And just like whenever you go into like an emergency room or something and they ask you to rate your pain on a scale
Hmm.
of 0 to 10, and you tell them it's a 10, but the nurse has given birth and they're saying your cut is not a 10, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
It's the pain is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
um and it's really whenever it comes to empathizing with people and holding space with them and helping them feel understood, um, that's something that analogy is what I hold close to myself. Just because it's not a 10 to me does not mean it's a 10 to them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Great point.
Thank you. What are some of the things, if you don't mind sharing, that you have helped your clients through?
So I go through, there's actually like a particular group that I host weekly on our platform. And it follows a certain framework that I kind of came up with. I call it UPIC. It's an acronym for understanding, progress, impermanence, connection, and kindness.
Hmm.
And so we move through these 5 things on as sort of like a way of moving through life, and how do those apply. So like understanding wise also can include awareness, and that if you have an awareness that there is a situation, or that there might be something else that you don't know and would like to have more of an understanding of, or what could you learn and gain new understanding from a past experience or something that you're currently going through, but
Oh,
getting
hold
some
on.
understanding first. And the second part of that is as far as progress, that progress, just like when you're evaluating somebody's traumatic events like we were talking about, progress, to evaluate that for someone else is not fair either, because progress could be one step. Like maybe it was hard for them to just get out of bed that day, but that's progress.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas somebody else may go, no, you got to 10x your effort, and if you're not doing this and doing taking massive action, then you're not progressing enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are two opposite ends of the same thing, which is, even if you're knocked down or knocked back or whatever, you can do something towards
Mm-hmm.
making progress in your life, whatever it is, whatever the situation is. um, Impermanence is kind of key, because realizing that things don't stay the same,
Mm-hmm.
that they're always going through a state of change in some way or fashion, and that when it's really difficult, knowing that it's not always going to be this difficult. And also on the flip side, when you're even when things are really good, to really pay attention and show some gratitude and experience when they are that good, because it's not always going to be that way too. You're going to have some tough times ahead also.
Absolutely.
And keeping things into perspective. um, and connection, we talked about connection and the need for that. That is fairly self-explanatory, but whether
Yeah.
that's through different forms of support or family or otherwise, but building connection in your environment as a whole, and kindness, not just to other people, but also to yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times we forget to be kind to ourselves, and because we're our own biggest critics, and
Mm-hmm.
we have the inner voice that is easy to put ourselves down and things like that. But when you are kind to other people, and the effect that it has, and the ripple, especially the ripple effect that you can create in an environment around you,
Mm-hmm.
then it really makes things better. It's not just for them, it's for you, it's for them, it's for the other people that they come in
Mm-hmm.
contact with. And that continues on. So
Oh, I absolutely agree. I speak about that ripple effect of like the practicing self love and self care pretty often, um, because it truly does. It's kind of like, you can't pour from an empty cup.
mhm,
And I really prioritize trying, as a mom, it's hard sometimes, but I try to pour from a cup of abundance rather than an empty cup.
mhm,
And the care or the interactions that you give to other people when you are fulfilled yourself is going to be a lot more beneficial, not only for you, but for them, because you've taken care of yourself first.
absolutely, absolutely. In every environment, with your kids, with your spouses and significant others, people at work, all of that. If you're lacking, or frustrated, or difficult, or there's stress, like all those kinds of things, if you're not operating at closer to an optimum level, then everything tends to suffer to at least some degree around you, because of that
Mm-hmm.
interaction. So 100% filling your cup.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else that you want to chat about?
Oh, I could talk honestly forever.
Same.
So I think I'd like to circle back to kind of how we started, about just the notion that help for people can come in different ways. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that the more that people can open their minds to potentially stepping outside of their immediate comfort zone, to experience some growth, however that may look, and maybe being open and willing to try different things, even if they previously dismissed them, like
Mm-hmm.
what you had shared as well, that that it helps to develop that general growth mindset, that it's not a finite barrier or boundary that we live in. Like, there is
Hmm.
infinite potential, and hopefully that's comforting.
It definitely is, because that's something that I've discovered too, is the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset.
Hmm.
And your mindset truly affects your perspective. Everything there, I mean, two people can walk in with different mindsets into the same exact situation, the same building, have the same exact experience, but when they walk out, their mindset is going to pull away completely different things that they remember. The person walked in might notice the music that was playing and how maybe the sweets smelled or something, whereas the other person can notice how the cashier had a slight attitude and maybe the trash was overflowing a little bit. um Mindset, it really really goes a long way, and if you can work towards that growth mindset, it truly does help you grow.
Yeah, yeah, you would exactly. And people can be faced with the same two barriers. You walk into a situation and both of them say, "Oh, I'm supposed to get this whatever homework assignment done." It's like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I'm never going to do it." And one says, "Sorry, I'll just take a zero because my
Mhm.
internet's down or whatever." And somebody else says, "No, I'm going to figure out a way." And they find a way to do it. Either they get up early and go in and get it done, or they go to a
Mhm.
coffee shop and get internet, or they borrow friends, but they're willing to do something about it, as opposed to just accepting that first barrier and then giving up of whatever it is. I know that's an overly simple example, but
Mhm.
there's so many of that we're faced with on an everyday basis, that
Mhm.
how we view things can determine the direction that we take, and can be truly pivotal.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've seen it a lot, in my life, not only myself but friends or coworkers. There's a lot of people who, when faced with maybe a challenge, will just kind of give up because they're like, "Oh well, the world sucks, life sucks. This is just what it is." And then there are those other people that are like, "I'm going to make this work." Like you said, I'm going to go in early, or I'm going to, just try something else. They just don't give up. And when it comes to life isn't easy. And so knowing that you can't just give up and that you can keep working, and even the small steps can make a difference. Small steps add to big steps, and just keep pushing and not giving up. It truly does go far.
Definitely. And
Hmm.
being willing to accept help from others along that way
Yes,
too. That's
that's huge.
Yeah, definitely.
I seen a quote, and it was, I can't quote it exactly now, but just because you feel alone doesn't mean that you have to heal alone.
Hmm.
And it's really helpful to have another perspective, just like I said, how your clients, they work in groups. It's so nice to not be alone and to have help, because I mean, ultimately we're supposed to live, in like these villages, and we're supposed to work together, and everybody's supposed to be a part of this team. But the way that the world has evolved, that's not the case anymore. And a lot of people are, stuck home doing everything by themselves every day. And so it's really important to notice, like, hey, I need help in this situation. Let me reach my hand out to somebody who can.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, um, do you was there anything else that you wanted to chat about, or would you like to maybe tell people where they could get in contact with you?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're interested and want to find out more about Innovia Behavioral Health, you can go to innoviabh.com and check it out. And if we're not a place for you, then you can always contact us, and we can help you find resources in your local area, or for your needs, whether that's individual therapists, coaches, etc. We just want to make sure that people are getting that help and support they're looking for.
Perfect. I'll make sure that's linked in the description as well. And do you have any social medias by chance?
Yes, should be across the board at Innovia BH, and I'll make sure and send those to you as well.
Perfect. And I'll make sure those are in the description as well.
Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know our lives were a little hectic, and one of us is in a closet right now.
Right.
Um,
Uh,
but I appreciate your time here, and I look forward to the listeners hearing this.
Likewise. Thank you so
All
much,
right.
Abby. Take care.
Thank you. You too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.